Hello everyone. In this video, I would analyze an article from the Hindu titled Dialing Right on 5G Spectrum Sale. Now, this article is based on the recent spectrum auction of 5G. And students, the agenda for today's video. So first, I would discuss the main points made in the article. Next, I would talk about the 5G technology, what it is, what is its significance, what are the challenges in the rollout, uh, why it has been a setback for the telcos, and what is the way forward, right? So let's begin. Now, the article says, students, that India's latest auction of telecommunication spectrum, including bands ideally suited for offering fifth generation technology services, drew bids exceeding a record of rupees 1.5 lakh crore, in a clear sign that the industry is on the path to recovery, students. So we all know that from the past few years, the telecom industry has been, sort of struggling to perform well, and it was in a poor shape, in bad health. But the you know the if you look at the bids that it drew, it exceeded a record of rupee 1.5 lakh crore. This is a clear sign that the industry is now on the path to recovery, students. And Reliance Jio, as expected, emerged as the top bidder for the spectrum, cornering 48% of the airwave, students. So 48% of the spectrum was allocated to Reliance Jio, and they acquired by offering more than rupees 88,000 crore in total. Next was Bharti Airtel. It bid just under half that amount for 39% of the spectrum, students. While the most debt-laden Vodafone Idea came in a distant third by committing close to rupees 19,000 crore for about 12% of the spectrum, students. So Reliance, Airtel, and Vodafone Idea in that order. Now, very interestingly, students, some of the private companies also, bid for the spectrum. They bid for it for their own private use. This is known as captive users. When you use it, not for the when you buy it, not for further selling it to or leasing it out to other companies, but for your own private use. This is known as captive use. So Adani Group, it's a captive user of 5G, and it made its first foray into the telecom space by successfully bidding for a very small but targeted quantum of spectrum for captive use. And the fact that 71% of the airwaves on the block one bids is testament to the improvement in the industry's health, students. So, like I mentioned earlier, that this is like shows that the health of the telecom sector is improving. Another point I would want to make here is that Adani Group is not the only private company that has bought its students. Other large conglomerates must have also bid for the 5G spectrum. Now, students, the article talks about the lessons learned. That what are the lessons learned from this spectrum allocation, 5G spectrum allocation? So, number one, the high reserve price. That means the high base price at which the spectrum was offered to the telco students. So it says that the price was very high and it dampened the enthusiasm for certain spectrum band students. So the telcos believe that. They appealed that the base price was very high and it was not in alignment with the larger um, reform mission of the government. The government wants to, it doesn't look at sale of spectrums only from revenue generation point of view. That means 5G spectrum is not just a source of revenue for the government, but it's a national resource, students. And the government wants to improve the rural urban digital gap. It wants to take the best of internet services to the remotest of the regions of the country. And this is possible when the 5G spectrum, which is supposed to, the 5G technology, which is supposed to offer the fastest telecommunication services. Particularly, if I talk about the band, students, so 700 megahertz spectrum, which is known to be the best quality spectrum, that remained unsold here, right? So basically, the government here, the telecom companies, they sort of alleged that the government is looking at it purely from the angle of revenue generation and not 5G spectrum being a national resource, the way a public good, the way railways is, right? So there was this demand for rationalization, for reduction of the base prices of the spectrum. And while the 3.3 gigahertz and 26 gigahertz were snapped up at the reserve price, 600 megahertz was left untouched, and only 60% of the 700 megahertz spectrum remained unsold, students. And like we know, 700 megahertz, this is ideal for rural connectivity, but it remained unsold because of the high price. And a spectrum is seen as a precious national resource, the government would do well to not let it lie unused and instead price it at an optimal manner, at an affordable rate, so that telecoms could buy it and further provide the services to the rural areas as well. Next, students, what is 5G technology? So 5G is the 5th generation mobile network, students. So we had 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, and now 5G. So 1G was only about voice, wherein you could just make voice calls. Then we had 2G, wherein you had voice and text. You could make calls as well as you could send messages, text messages. Then 3G was about voice, text, as well as data, internet, right? Now 4G is about all of it, all that 3G was about, voice, text, and data, but a much higher speed, a much better speed. And 5G is like even better speed. All of this plus even better speed. So it enables a new kind of network that is designed to connect virtually everyone and everything together, including machines, objects, and devices. So basically, one of the primary benefits of 5G, other than of course high speed, improved services, is that it helps or it leads to like very strong connection between devices. And we all know there's something called Internet of Things, which is the emergent technology, students, which is like a web of interconnected devices. So 5G would facilitate and support the strengthening of the Internet of Things technology, and not just Internet of Things, but other technologies also, students, right? So internet speed in the high band spectrum of 5G has been tested to be as high as 20 gigabits per second, students. Very important. What is the speed that 5G offers? 20 gigabits. While in case of 4G, it has been recorded at 1 gigabits only, students. 1 gigabits per second. And contrast this with 20 gigabits offered by 5G. So there's humongous difference between the services and speeds offered by the two technologies. And in India, Satcom Industry Association, what is Satcom, students? Satellite communication. They have voiced concerns over the government's plan to include the millimeter wave bands in the 5G spectrum auction. So students, the government included millimeter wave bands in the 5G spectrum allocation. So millimeter wave bands, these are certain specific bands with very high frequency and low latency, as in very low loss, and very short wavelengths, very high frequency, very short wavelength. So this band, students, is very suitable for satellite communications. And this is the only one of the 4 bands that is used by Satcom Association. But because this is a very good quality band, it is insisted, it is preferred by both telcos, the telecommunication companies, as well as the Satcom companies, satellite communications companies. So it is insisted, preferred by both. However, the government chose to include it in the 5G spectrum auction as well. And this was highly objected by the Satcom Industry Association. Next, students, what will be the significance of 5G rollout? So it is useful across 3 main connected services, students, right? Number 1, in enhanced mobile broadband. So mobile services, of course. mission critical communication, students. So what is mission critical communication? It is about our ability to quickly respond to emergencies like a natural disaster. So in such events, 5G would play a very critical role, students, in fighting the emergency. And finally, the Internet of Things that I just spoke about. Then students, in addition to making our smartphones better, 5G mobile technology can usher in new immersive experiences such as virtual reality, augmented reality, with faster, more uniform data rates, lower latency, and lower cost per bit, students. So virtual reality, VR, AR, they are being used, increasingly used by industries, these days. For example, virtual, it's like you're able to create a virtual, a simulated, uh, environment. And augmented is, wherein you can superimpose digital data on real life environment. For example, if you have ever tried, trying those spectacles on any lens cart applications, so that is the use of augmented reality. So the spectacles, they're like that's digital data, isn't it? And that's superimposed on you. You see how it looks on you, on your face. So that's the use of augmented reality. So these services, these technologies would become much better with the coming of 5G technology. Then mission critical communication, students. It can enable new services that can transform industries with ultra reliable, available, low latency links, and would allow remote control of critical infrastructure, vehicles, and medical procedures. And massive Internet of Things, students. So 5G is meant to seamlessly connect a massive number of embedded sensors in a virtually everything, to the ability to scale down data rates, power, and mobility, providing low cost solutions. So basically, it finds much use as a big facilitator, a promoter of Internet of Things, students, right? The devices can be connected with each other, and the performance depends on how fast there's transmission of data between the devices. And this is only possible through 5G technology. Next, students, Industrial Revolution 4.0. So combined with Internet of Things, the cloud technology, big data, artificial intelligence, edge computing, 5G could be a critical enabler of the fourth industrial revolution, students. It would enable all these services which characterize the fourth industry 4.0. And smooth governance, of course, 5G technology would be used by the government to provide better governance and services to the public, and to offer better ease of living and ease of doing business. And this will also increase convenience and create many employment opportunities. Next, students, what will be the challenges regarding 5G rollout? So number one, we're discussing the challenges, students. Number one, critical infrastructure. So 5G will require a fundamental change to the core architecture of the communication system, students. So right now we have a communication system that is suited to the 3G and 4G technology, but 5G technology, would require a fundamental change to this setup, to this architecture. And the government would need to augment or to support the existing, boost the existing infrastructure. Next, students, low fiberization footprint. So there is need to upgrade fiber connectivity across India, which at present connects only 30% of India's telecom towers, students. So 5G has better reach and better penetration and probably better, speed. But of what use is that if we don't have a strong fiber connectivity across the country, right? So presently, it connects only 30% of India's to telecom towers. So this needs to go up if we want to really make the best use of the 5G technology. So like it says, for an efficient 5G, India launch and adoption should double. It should be double to what it is at present. Then students, Make in India hardware challenges. Now, in order to promote Make in India, the government has sort of banned certain foreign telecom OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, the hardware manufacturers. Now, which is, of course, it doesn't meet the kind of the best global standards that is required by the 5G technology, because it is our domestic companies that currently cater to this. So this would be a hardware challenge, students. The domestic companies would have to upgrade uh, the product and services provided by them so that they can suit the 5G technology. Then students, high spectrum pricing, like we just discussed, that the high base price, students, that's a major dampener, a deterrent for companies to really uh, buy spectrum. So India's 5G spectrum pricing is several times costlier than the global average, and this would be a detriment to India's cash-strapped telcos. And we know that our telecom companies like Airtel and Vodafone, Idea particular, BSNL, they're already cash-strapped, right? So this is another challenge. Then, of course, students, the digital divide. So 5G will not bridge the digital divide between rural and urban. In fact, it would increase it in the short term. So that's this whole digital divide, and that's because uh, the low connectivity of, or like I discussed about the optical fiber outreach, students. So the urban services would get better, but there would be a problem in taking 5G to the rural and remote areas, particularly like I discussed, the 700 megahertz band that remains unsold because of high prices, which was suitable for rural connectivity. So that remaining unsold, and the foundation infrastructure missing in the rural area, students. So the digital divide would only increase over the short term. Then niche services. Niche services means that it is going to be the adoption of 5G is going to be very slow, students, right? Like 4G and 3G took up very fast, actually. They were like distributed services. The adoption rate was very fast. But 5G is going to be much slower, and it will get intensified over a comparatively longer period and concentrated to a particular sector. And it is also said that probably by 2025 that 5G would sort of come to its full potential. Then interference. So there are concerns that the rollout of 5G mobile services could potentially interfere with the aircraft navigation system. So it can interfere with our security systems. And Air India recently canceled 8 flights on US routes in January 22 because of these concerns. Then, of course, students, financial liability on consumers. So for the transition from 4G to 5G technology, one has to upgrade to the latest cellular technology, thereby creating financial liability on consumers. So, people will have to buy devices that support 5G. They will have to buy the latest cellular technology. And right now, it is said that a very few percentage of people own a 5G phone, a phone that supports 5G technology. So that's going to be a financial liability on consumers, and they might not immediately, because people are supposed to change their devices. So this would be a financial liability and would take some time. Next, students, capital inadequacy. So lack of flow of cash and adequate capital with the suitable telecom companies is delaying the 5G spectrum allocation. So this is something which is not relevant at the present, because obviously the allocation has happened, but this has been a concern in the past. Now, students, choosing the optimal 5G technology standard. So this is another challenge. So there's this tussle between the homegrown 5GI standard and the global third generation partnership project 3GPP standard needs to be concluded in order to hasten the 5G technology implementation. So basically, students, there's another concern about the standards, right? The 5G standards. So any technology is to be supported by, the rules and specifications. There has to be certain established rules and specifications for running a technology. So we have different standards. One is the homegrown indigenous 5GI standard, and the other is a third generation partnership project. So basically, there's this whole clash of sorts, that which standards do we adopt and adhere to. So there's this huge, demand for merger of the two standards. So that is another challenge. Now, why is 5G spectrum a setback for telcos? Why is it a setback for telecommunication company students? So one is allocation methodology. So the main concern centered around the methodology of allocating spectrums to non-telcos also. So there's this whole controversy around, or between this a clash between the telecom companies as well as the non-telecom private companies who are interested or who bought the spectrum for their private use. Now, students, you have to understand this. For example, you have uh, Geo, right? Now, if it buys the spectrum, it would further offer it to the private companies. They would lease the spectrum to private companies. So, if you've got these big private companies that need their private network, say for a company like, say, Infosys or a company like an ITC, they would need their own private network, obviously because that's much faster. Your private network is much faster. So, Reliance would offer them, the Geo would offer them their services, right, and would get paid in return. But if companies begin to buy spectrum on their own, right, like I spoke about the whole captive use of spectrum for the private use, then it would obviously harm the business of the telecommunication companies, isn't it? So that was a concern, that why did government allow non-telecommunication private companies like Adani Group to buy the spectrum? They shouldn't have allowed it, and they should then, they would have been then forced to buy or lease the services of the telecommunication companies. So these companies would have an incentive to continue in the business. So that was one issue, students. Second, impact on revenues. So the Cellular Operator Association of India has made its position clear, allowing independent entities to set up private captive networks with direct 5G spectrum allotment. So that is something that I just spoke about, and this led to the impact on revenues. So one, they had a problem with the methodology, and it also impacted their revenues. Second, increased competition. So since telcos, after buying expensive 5G airways in an auction, might not be in a position to match tech companies on price on enterprise network deals, as that is to set the gain coveted airwaves at a nominal fee from the government. So what this says is that private companies, the whole allocation methodology, the pricing methodology is also such that private companies get it at a nominal rate, which is, and the price paid by the telecommunication sector is much higher. So again, that's another conflict of interest. Limited applications, right? The telcos emphasize that the allotted spectrum should be used for machine-to-machine applications only and not to be set up for private networks. And challenges with infrastructure. The telcos also question regarding the electromagnetic frequency regulation, since tower density in the country will increase on account of the 5G rollout, and there may be challenges to setting up new towers. So we know, students, there's a high telecom tower density in India. There's a high penetration in India and telecom penetration. And this is another challenge, students, that how do we accommodate more towers, more 5G towers? Lastly, students, the way forward, how do we resolve these issues? So one is pricing rationalization. So rationalization of this spectrum pricing is needed so that the government generates adequate revenue from auction without hampering implementation plans. So number one, the government will have to reduce the prices, something I already spoke about. It will have to treat it as a public good, as a national resource, that and not just as a source of revenues. Second, government's contribution. The government has complete control over the inputs. One of the key inputs of 5G is the band spectrum, students. And by managing the design of the spectrums, the government can control the price to be paid by people. The government shall support the telecom companies to roll out networks that are sustainable and affordable. So basically, the government will have to support the telcos in this whole rollout process. So 5G technology also has the potential to bridge the rural-urban gap, right? If the basic infrastructure is laid down, like the optical fibers and all in the rural areas. So the 5G technology has the potential to bridge the rural-urban digital divide. It can also enable the manufacturing sector students, the telecommunication manufacturing sector. This is an opportunity for them as 5G services are rolled out, that it is important to strengthen this market so that not just users but also manufacturers and providers of these technology can have a big impact on the global sale, right? And finally, there needs to be a collaboration between the telecom companies. Finally, students, to conclude, so broadband, especially mobile broadband, has become an integral part of the daily lives of the citizens. The rapid expansion of 4G services across the country led to boosting the digital connectivity. And now it's time for 5G, which has the potential to work as a catalyst in achieving more immense overall economic growth of the country. And the tussle over private captive networks will only add to the list of rollout roadblocks that need to be removed and resolved to accomplish all the significance of this innovation, students, right? So that's all for this video, students. I will see you next week with another video on editorial analysis. Thank you so much.